Hello guys, welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to be teaching about CSS Grid. There's a very significant difference between CSS Grid and Flexbox, being that CSS Grid is two-dimensional while Flexbox is one-dimensional. Okay, so in CSS Flexbox you can only align within certain restrictions, but in CSS Grid you can as well overlap certain columns and overlap certain rows. So we're going to be going into CSS Grid and we'll quickly learn how we can use it to our own advantage. Okay, we are now in the VS Code and I'll be creating a parent container as well as with some children inside. So I'll just give this a grid container and I'll call this grid item, and in this grid item I would just duplicate this 5 times. Okay, I can say grid item 1 for example. Okay, and I'll duplicate this grid item 1 for example. Oh, sorry. And I copy this and I duplicate this 5 times. Okay, so grid item 2, grid item 3, grid item 4, grid item 5. Oh, 5. Grid item 4, and as well change this other class to 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we now have 5 different children element in this parent container here. So first of all, we'll just give this a little style. I give this a little style. I say I can give it a background color of red. We can say red. Okay. Okay, so we also have I'll open this in our VS Code and I'll open this in our browser. Okay, so we can see, let me just give this also a color of white. Okay, so I'll open this side by side with our browser. Alright, so now, okay, let me give this also a border. I can say 2 pixels and I'll give it a white and I'll say solid. Okay, so now in CSS Grid, similar to Flexbox, we would have to acknowledge and style it from the container. So I go to the container or the parent, wrapping the entire children here, and I give this a display of grid. Okay, and you can see nothing happens. Okay, nothing happens here. Alright, so we'll try to arrange it through the two-dimensional axis like we have explained here in the browser. Okay, so we'll try to style the columns, the amount of columns we want and the amount of rows that we want. Okay, so in this case, if you want I want maybe 2 columns here, I can say grid template columns and I give it the width of the column I want. Okay, so I want to use 200 pixels in this case. We can say we have 1 column now and I want to use 200 pixels again. Okay, so we have 2 columns. Okay, so this is how to arrange columns. Okay, like I said, grid is two-dimensional, okay, while CSS is just one-dimensional. So we can style and arrange both the columns, which is the vertical, and the rows, which are the horizontal. So in this case we have 1 2 3 columns and we have 1 2 3 rows. Okay, in this picture here. So we go back and this is one of the ways to style, you know, the column. So if we wanted 3 columns, we would simply put so we have 3 columns, and if I want to make it a 4 column, I would say 200 pixels, and we now have, you know, a 4 column here. So if I scroll this is also 4 column. Now there is also a way to make sure that we don't repeat these 200 pixels 4 times if we want these 200 pixels to be the column width. Okay, so we can also use a property value known as repeat. Okay, and we put the amount of times we want to repeat the column. I can say 3, and put a comma, and we'll give the width. So I can use 150 pixels here, and we can say we have 1, 2, 3, and we have 150 pixels for the width, you know, of each column. Okay, so I can say 250 here, and we can say 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I'll just use 200, and I'll repeat it just twice. Okay, so that's for the column. Okay, so I said CSS grid is 2-dimensional. Okay, so now we can also do the same thing for the rows. All right, so I can say grid template rows, and if we want to put maybe 2 rows, we can say 200 pixels. So you noticed the first one is for the first row, and we can say another 200 pixels. Okay, for the second row here. So it's very, very important you know the difference between the rows and the columns so that you don't mix them up. And we can have 2 rows here, we can have a third, okay, which is just similar to this. Okay, so similar to, you know, the property we have here, the property value we have here, we can also use the repeat. All right, so the repeat is used here. Let's say I want to have 3 rows, I put a comma, and I put maybe 200 pixels. Okay, so we now have 3 rows. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, so it's very, very important we you know the difference between the rows and the columns, and know how to use them. Okay, so there are other property values that we can use here, like 1 fraction or 2 fraction, but we can also do something like this. So I want to use 2 columns. I can say I can use 2 fraction and 1 fraction. Okay, so you can see it has engulfed 2 fraction of a column and 1 fraction of the other column. But if you're starting out, it's just good to use very simple 2 pixels. Okay, so it's very, very similar. If you want to make 1 row, or sorry, 1 column bigger than the other, you can use the fraction or you can use the pixels. Okay, so take example, I want to make this first one 300 pixels. I want to make the second one 200 pixels. All right, so you can see similar, working to the same thing as using a fraction. All right, but if you want to have the same size, you can just use it. I have used it here, so I want to have the same size and I want to have it on 200 pixels. Okay, so you can see the difference between using fraction and using repeat, or just writing them out. Okay, so it's very important you know these differences. All right, so there's also a way to put a minimum row. Okay, a minimum row. So take example, I have content in this grid, 1 item. Okay, let me just generate a content here using our normal lorem. So I can say lorem, let's say I want to use 300 words. All right, so I save this, and you can see there is no how do I put it, there's no overflow here. Okay, all our content here has been engulfed inside the row. All right, so we can't see what is beneath the last word here. So there's also a way in CSS grid that we can make a minimum row and a maximum row. All right, so take example, I want to have a minimum row of let's say 150 and maximum row. So I will just clean this and we'll use a property name known as grid auto rows. Okay, I think we have it here, and we use something they call min max, and we have, let's say, a minimum row which is for this first one here, all right, and the maximum row, which is for the second one after the comma. Okay, so the minimum row I can say 150 pixels, and a maximum row I can say auto. Okay, so our content is able to be adjusted, okay, while maintaining a minimum row of 150. So we can see on the first one here we have a minimum row of 150, and we have a maximum row of auto. Okay, so the minimum rows are applicable to these ones that don't have content, and the maximum row is applicable to this one on auto, okay, on the first one. So it's very important to know all this. So I also want to make mention of something. So in a case where we have let me clean this off. I will say grade, grid item 1. All right, so in a case where we have let's say we want to make only the first column, only the first row, I can say grid template rows. Okay, so I only give the first row a value, all right, of 200 pixels, and let's say I want to say, okay, other rows should have a certain value on default. So if I have a lot of children content here, and maybe I don't want to make all of them the same sizes, or I want to make just the first one 200 and the rest a different row, so I can put a command known as grid auto rows. Okay, a property known as grid auto rows. So grid auto rows, the rest of the rows would have a value of 150 pixels. All right, so we can see it from here. The first value has 200 pixels on the rows, okay, and the rest of the values have a 150. We can even make it bigger. We can say 300. Oh, 3000 is too much. We can say 300. So you can see the rest of the rows have a value of what, 300. all right, so that's it for the grid auto rows. Okay, we can also give it a grid auto rows automatically. So I can say grid auto rows of 150 pixels. Okay, so all of them have a grid auto row of 150. All of them have a row of 150. So just to come again, rows are the horizontal, while columns are the what, vertical. All right, so okay, the next thing I want to talk about is gap. Okay, similar to the flexbox where we have a gap, okay, we can have also a gap here. All right, so we can use a grid column gap, column gap. This is for the columns. You can say grid column gap of 20 pixels. So this to keep spaces between the columns, like we are seeing here. We have two columns here. All right, so this will keep space between the columns, 20 pixels within the columns. All right, and we can also have grid row gap, grid row gap. Grid row gap, and we can say 20 pixels also, or let's use 40 pixels. Okay, so one is for the column and one is for the row. Okay, we can also just give a general gap, okay, for the columns and the row. We can say grid gap, and we can say, let's say 30 pixels. Okay, so it has given a gap for both the rows and the columns. All right, so it's a very simple process, similar to flexbox. Flexbox, I think you just need to put the gap, but this is, you need to indicate that this is grid. All right, so we can see that CSS grid is more of very dynamic and two-dimensional, like I have mentioned, or how is indicated here, and it's a very straightforward process. So the next thing I want to talk about is what we call the grid column, or the grid template areas. Sorry. So before I proceed to the grid template areas, we can see each of the items here are arranged 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, similar to how it is here in the HTML. All right, so in the grid template area, it provides a way for you to arrange each of this column where you want. Okay, each of these items where you want. Okay, each of these items where you want. So I'm gonna give an instance here, and I will say grid template areas. All right, and I would just give the first one, since we have just two-dimensional, or we have two columns here, I would say header, for example, header. All right, so if I wanted to take, let's say, this 5 to be, the header here, and consume the entire first row here, what do? I extract the class of this 5, and I will say what, grid item 5. Okay, and I would say grid item 5, I would say grid area, grid area and I'll give it a header. Okay, so we can see we have been able to arrange this item 5 to consume the two spaces here. Okay, so what you need to know about this grid template area is that this first header here is for the first column, and the second header here is for the second column. Okay, the second template area here is for the second area. Okay, so we can do the same thing since we have 3 rows here, 1 2 3. Okay, so what we can do is that I can call this, you can give it any name of your choice. I'll call this second one, I will say, oh sorry about that, I will say content 1 and what, content 2. Okay, this is for content 1 and content 2. And the second one I can say main 1, oh sorry, main 1 and main 2. Okay, so we can see we can arrange these to possibly be anything. So I can move this grid item 4 to be in this content 1 here. Okay, which covers the grid template area. All right, so take example, I want to move this grid item 4. I would say come here and extract this second class name here, copy, so I will say grid area, and I will call this content what, content 1. All right, so you can see our grid item 4 move from here to here. Okay, so it's very important you know all this, and I can just do this last one. Maybe I bring this item 2 to this second part here. All right, so what do? I say what, grid item 2, and I can say grid area, I will say what, content 2. Okay, so grid item 2 has come here. So it's very important we see how we can manipulate the grid template areas and use it to our own advantage. You don't necessarily have to use this, but it's very, very good, since this is a two-dimensional way of styling your element or styling content, okay, in CSS. So I'll just simply clean all this. I'll erase this. So another thing I want to talk about here is oh sorry. So another thing I want to talk about here is how to make columns overlap. Okay, how to make columns overlap. So in individual items here, okay, in the individual elements here, there's a way we can make columns overlap. Okay, so in grid there's a way we're supposed to know. So in grid, this is known as the first line, second line, third line, okay, for the columns, for the rows, sorry. Then for the columns, known as the first line, second line, third line, fourth line, if you have multiple columns. Okay, so there's a way we can make these columns overlap and these rows also overlap. So take example, in this grid item 1, I want to make this overlap to the third line. Okay, so what do? I want to make the column overlap to the third line. Okay, that's this item here, overlap to the third line. So what do? I say grid column start. Okay, so where is it going to start? I want it to start at the first line, and I say grid column end. So I want it to go to the what? To the third line. Okay. Oh, this for grid item 5. I want to do grid item 1. Sorry. Grid item 1. Grid item 1. Oh, this should be row. All right. Row. Okay, so for this row I've been able to break and override this other items below it. So like I said, this is the first line, second line, third line. Okay, so we can even do it to the fourth one. So we can say grid row 4. Okay, so we have been able to dynamically override this other columns, these other rows at the end without disturbing the document flow. Okay, so we can also do this for other ones that we have here. So take example, I want to make this grid item 2 to override to the third one. Okay, so I say grid item 2, I copy this and I say grid item 2, let it override to the third one. So I can say grid item 2 to 3. Okay, so we have been able to create this. So imagine you want to have a gallery of pictures, a gallery of content, or a whole lot of stuff you want to style. You'll be able to do this more dynamic in CSS Grid than Flexbox. Okay, so that's why I said it's two-dimensional, and it has a lot of features that you can use to make your web page more beautiful, and all that. So alternatively, there's a way we can use the column, the row. Okay, so we can say grid row, okay, so we want to have it start at the first one, this is for item 1, and end at what? At the third one. Okay, or let's say the fourth one. So alternatively we can use this. All right, so it's similar to this. Okay, so we can have, let me just comment this out. I can say grid row, okay, 1/3. Okay, so it's an alternative to this. All right, so this is for the row. We can also do the same thing for the columns. Let's say this grid item 4, I want to make a grid column. Okay, I can say grid column start or grid column. Okay, I want it to start at the first row and I want it to end at the third line. Sorry, so we can say we also have the same thing here. So this is for column and this is for row. Okay, alternatively we can also use this. All right, anyone you're very comfortable with. So CSS Flexbox provides us with a whole lot of stuffs, okay, that we can use to style our web page. Okay, CSS Grid, provide us a whole lot of stuff that we can use to style our web page. So I will just clean this, and to recall, we can style and align elements in Flexbox. Okay, so in Grid we can also do the same thing here. Okay, so take example, you want to align the horizontal axis of from the parent here, okay, which is the grid container. You want to align the horizontal axis. Okay, so we can use justify content and we can use center. So you can notice it has gone to the center of the web page. Okay, the center of the web page. Let me just clean this. You can see it's on the start, so the center of the web page. Okay, so we can also use start, which is by default always on start. All right, we can also use end, which you take it to the end. All right, so similar to Flexbox, I think Flexbox you use flex end and flex start or something like that, but in CSS Grid you just put end or you put what? Start. Okay, so for the align, this is for the horizontal. For the vertical, we can also use align content align content, and we can use center. Okay, now for it to work, we need to give it a height. Okay, for it to work, so we'll give our container a height. So I'll just give it a height here, and I'll give it a 100 VH, and you can see it has gone to the center. Okay, we can also arrange it to the center. Okay, so that's it for CSS Grid. And going over everything, we know how to use the template, we know how to use the the row, grid template column, or grid auto row. Okay, so it's a very straightforward process. Like I said, this is two-dimensional, which you can style both the columns and the rows. Other than one-dimensional flexbox, you can only style one-dimensional aspect of row and columns. Okay, but here you can create multiple rows, and you can create multiple columns. Okay, you can align multiple columns and all that. Okay, so it's very easy, and I hope you go over this tutorial and you learn CSS Grid, and see you in the next video.